And down the line tonight after one of the most tornadic weeks in the Trump presidency. And that, friends, is saying something. Let's remember where we started. The country rubbed raw after the violence, hate, terror, and murder in Charlottesville, Virginia. The president stepped up and made it worse in just about everyone's opinion except the white supremacists. So all week, continuing into this evening, we've seen people backing away from the president and the idea that Nazis and those protesting against them are equal in any way. Corporate CEOs, artists, tonight the first member of his Evangelical Advisory Board, and billionaire investor Carl Icahn, who the president name-dropped during the campaign like a kid at a cast party, all backing away from this president. We've seen Republican lawmakers slowly but steadily increasing criticism. Here's the latest tally on your screen of all the people who've called out the president from his own party by name so far. We've seen Mitt Romney scold him, not a surprise perhaps, but also military commanders from the Joint Chiefs of Staff implicitly rebuking the president. That is a major surprise. And today, on top of it all, and perhaps in a matter more of convenience than coincidence, the president fired his chief strategist, Steve Bannon. Take a look at this picture. First, it was Michael Flynn, then Sean Spicer, then Reince Priebus, then the meteoric rise and fall of the mooch, and now, finally, Mr. Bannon, as the president called him the other day, Mr. Bannon, gone. And we're being told more heads could roll, including perhaps talking head Sebastian Gorka, Dr. Gorka, to you and me. Now, while firing Bannon has shifted focus away from the flames of hate the president helped to fan, the relief may be short-lived. Bannon is already back at his old website, Breitbart, and apparently trying to sever Trump's ties to his all-important base. One of the cronies at Breitbart for Bannon tweeting the word war. Bannon himself telling the Weekly Standard the presidency that he and Donald Trump fought for and won is now over. Think of that. All right, a lot to cover and to talk about, so let's bring in CNN's Jim Acosta joining us first with the very latest from the president's vacation spot in New Jersey. Jim, what are we finding out about the timing here, how this went down with Bannon?
Yeah. Well, Chris, it was alt-right, stage left, you might say, for Steve Bannon. From what we understand from talking to our sources, this has been building for some time. And according to sources I talked to earlier today, Steve Bannon was supposed to be fired a couple of weeks ago. And that did not happen. And he was given a chance to resign, which apparently he took the opportunity to do. But make no mistake, he was forced out. He was fired apprentice style by the president and by Chief of Staff John Kelly. Now, a couple of reasons why this was. This has been building for some time. This is not the first time that Steve Bannon had been rumored to be on the chopping block. The president had fallen out of love with Steve Bannon a while ago. He was concerned about Bannon appearing on the cover of Time magazine, being lampooned on Saturday Night Live, stealing the limelight and sucking up a lot of the oxygen in Washington. But I think more critically, Chris, the new Chief of Staff, John Kelly, wanted to put in place a much more disciplined, much more orderly power structure inside the White House. And from what I understand, talking to sources, Steve Bannon was just not going to survive in that world. As we saw in this last week, he was doing interviews, granting interviews with journalists, and sort of freelancing, putting his own agenda out there, really in front of the president's. And from what we understand, that was just not going to fly in John Kelly's new world. And there may be other heads rolling on the horizon here, Chris.
So the article where Steve Bannon said that there is no military solution for North Korea, that was seen as a little bit of a, okay, one step too far, forget about the timing, he has to go right now. Interestingly, are you also hearing that this is significant because of what it is not about, that this is not about Charlottesville, Virginia, that what happened and what was said there by the president was all of his own, that wasn't Bannon engineered and the reason for his exit, true?
Well, make no mistake. I mean, this did certainly change the news cycle today. I mean, when the president was called out essentially by the mother of Heather Heyer on morning television earlier today, when the mother of Heather Heyer is saying, "I will not speak to the president," this was going to be a devastating news cycle for this White House today, and forcing Steve Bannon out. That certainly did change the narrative. It certainly did change the news cycle. I mean, one of the things that we're hearing is whether or not Steve Bannon and Breitbart are going to go to war against this White House. Earlier today, you saw that one editor for Breitbart was Joel Pollack was tweeting that it was going to be hashtag war. And I talked to a source who talked to Bannon earlier today who said, no, wait a minute, I'm going to be going to war with this president for this White House. He does not want to see President Trump fail, according to the source who spoke to Steve Bannon. But make no mistake, if Breitbart sees and Steve Bannon sees this White House moving in a more moderate direction, you might see some of these hostilities resume.
All right, Jim Acosta, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Let's bring in the panel. We have tonight a great group of minds to put to this matter. You got Josh Green, author of Devil's Bargain, Steve Bannon, Donald Trump, and the Storming of the Presidency. Also with us, Kirsten Powers, Joseph Pinion, Alice Stewart, and Ryan Lizza. All right, Josh. We got to get to the why this happened. Man, there's so many competing narratives. I'm sure all of our devices have been buzzing like crazy about this. But what's sticking out to me right now is, subject to what you're about to tell me, is Bannon telling a writer for the Weekly Standard, the presidency that I fought for with Donald Trump, that we won, is now over. Is that what he was saying to you?
Basically, yeah. I mean, he told me that, and take this with a grain of salt given the source, that this was not a firing, that this has been in the works for a while, that he was thinking about leaving a week or two ago, delayed it because of the Charlottesville uproar, and this is something that had been agreed to both with Chief of Staff John Kelly, discussed with the president, and it was clear, Bannon told me, that he is leaving on amicable terms, and he's going outside to wage war for Trump and not against Trump.
Amicable terms, presidency is over. Mutually agreed when we will leave, war. Which way do you see it?
So I'm sort of interested in your take on this, of what he means by that. Does he mean he's going to go out and go to war? It seemed to me, what I was reading, is that the criticism was really not of Donald Trump, but of the Republicans. That's sort of the way I was reading it. And that he is basically saying the presidency is over because the Republicans will not do what Donald Trump wants him to do, and because they're too moderate. Is that correct reading?
He didn't use that specific phrase with me.
Yeah.
But yes, that's exactly the idea that he was pushing forward, that, we have taken it this far. We've won the presidency. Trump's agenda is not moving forward in quite the way we'd like. So I, Steve Bannon, am going to go fight on his behalf on the outside. And he specified who it was he was going to go to war against. And it was establishment politicians. And I think by that he meant Republican leaders in Congress. It was the opposition party in the media, as Bannon likes to refer to us. And it was corporate America, too, who Trump and Bannon feel have betrayed Donald Trump.
So, well, here's part of the confusion, right? This is one of the problems with having an unknown political entity, because Donald Trump came into this without a set of core beliefs where well, if he says this, this is him. And if he says this is him compromising for a party or a platform or whatever it is. So to you, when you hear about all this, Joseph, what does it mean to you, and whether or not this administration is going to keep its connection to the populism that made it popular?
Well, I think there's always been this assumption that Donald Trump has been playing some type of wizardly three-dimensional chess. I think that is probably incorrect at this point. I think that the reality that has kind of been thrust upon us is that we have been playing three-dimensional chess on behalf of Donald Trump, right? That you have, these assumptions based on whatever your leanings are, that it is Jared and Ivanka who are going to pull him away from the populist message, even though there is literally zero evidence of that fact. And then you also have people who can draw a direct line from everything they hate about Donald Trump and connect that to Steve Bannon and say that he is the reason why we have all these policies being shoved down our throat that we don't like, or on the other side, that he's the reason that we have all these policies that we do like. And so I think at this juncture now, I think for better and for worse, the curtain has been drawn back. And we are forced to see now, in many ways, in stark terms, that, as we've said before, there is literally nobody who can force this president to do anything he does not want to do. He is a force of nature unto himself, for better and for worse. And I think that on some level, he might have exposed himself with the firing of Bannon. Because at this point, for the first time possibly in his entire life, the buck has to stop with him. And there will be no one else to point the finger at but him, because as we saw in that picture, everybody is
Well,
gone.
he has fired, Alice, most of the people who have, served him in that purpose of,
Right.
well, whose fault is it if it is not your own? How do you see this in terms of the implications for the president and his administration?
Well, with regard to the populist nationalist agenda and the economic nationalist agenda. Look, Bannon and Trump were soldiers in arms in this, and they still believe strong on immigration, strong on fighting for the working man, and those policies, in my view, will continue through Donald Trump. Look,
Why the confidence?
why the what?
Why the confidence that the president on his own will motivate that agenda when we haven't seen that from him unilaterally to this point?
Look where he stands on immigration. I mean, he's certainly strong on immigration. Building the wall in Mexico will pay for it. That's why he's bringing.
We don't know that that's going to raise wages for the working man. That's what I'm wondering.
But clearly, he tapped into something in this country with his ability to connect with the working man. And I think Bannon clearly lit the torch and carried the torch. Trump will continue to do so. The question is, who is he going to war with? There is a lot of talk with the people I've been speaking with that it is obviously the established Republican, but what some refer to as the White Wing, the White House Democrats. Jared and Ivanka and Gary Cohn and Dina Powell and those, and they're going to, and Bannon from the outside will make sure he holds his feet to the fire. I think what this departure means, two things. One man carries the spotlight in the White House, and that is the president, and there's a new sheriff in town, and that is Chief of Staff Kelly.
Can I just add to that? I asked Bannon about the West Wing Democrats, and in fact used precisely that term, and he would not engage with the question. He wouldn't answer it. He wouldn't take shots at Gary Cohn, at Jared, or Ivanka, but clearly this is something that was on his mind. I think he was trying to exit in a dignified fashion that wouldn't be looked at as a food fight. But that is something I would think a lot about if I were working in the West Wing, that Bannon on the outside is going to come after some of these people.
But now you have the big problem. The big problem has always been, well, what happens if you put Bannon on the outside? His connection to the base, having this mouthpiece in Breitbart, having someone who's heard countless conversations and intimate moments of the president. Now you have him, maybe Ryan Lizza, against you.
If you read the interview with the Weekly Standard by Peter Boyer, he is 100% clear that his version of Trumpism is dead, that the populist nationalist agenda has been stymied. He sort of personalized this whole thing, and he says very clearly that he's going to Breitbart to wage war against the people and institutions that stopped it in its tracks. He's as clear as day. And look, frankly, he was very clear in talking to journalists for months about that war inside the White House. I visited him in his office a few months ago. He threw down a copy of the Financial Times. He said, look at this front page story. The front page story was war in the Oval Office, Bannon versus Gary Cohn. He wanted me to see that this is the war that's happening in the administration. And so he's now going to take that battle outside, and he always viewed himself as being surrounded by these concentric circles of enemies. They were the so-called globalists in the West Wing. Then it was the enemies in the media, us. And then it was the Republican establishment on Capitol Hill. And then it was the business community. He used to joke like the Democrats, he didn't even have time to fight the Democrats because he was fighting so many people inside the White House and inside the larger Republican coalition.
And that was frustrating.
And that's the fight he's going to take now.
That bothered people, but now, like we saw in the movie Star Wars way back in the day, you have struck him down, but he may come back stronger than he ever was before, and we're going to have to see. Let's leave this right here for right now. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we have David Gergen. Now, he's seen his share of successful and unsuccessful presidents up close. And what is the difference between this transition from going through a hard time and making it into a better time? And later, we're going to have a defender of the president on this West Wing Democrat situation that they have going on, that Ryan and Josh and Alice were talking about. How big a deal is this? How potent can Steve Bannon be on the outside? All that ahead on 360. All right, Steve Bannon has been fired, but he has a different word for it. Free. Told the Weekly Standard that he's got his hands back on his weapons, namely Breitbart News, which could make the next few weeks even more interesting as Breitbart prepares to go to #war, as one editor there put it today. And as White House Chief of Staff Kelly prepares, we're told, to keep swinging the axe. What will that mean? What kind of discipline does he want to bring to the White House? So there is no shortage of drama. And the question is, does it leave any room, any space at all, for governing, for putting in place the agenda that supposedly put the president there?
LeBron James, the world's biggest basketball star, calling President Trump the so-called president. Andy Scholes has more in this morning's Bleacher Report. Good morning, Andy.
Hey, good morning, John. You know, LeBron James has never shied away from speaking out on social issues, and lately he's been voicing his displeasure with President Trump. And last night at his annual family charity event, LeBron said that he felt it was his responsibility to speak out on what's been going on.
The only way for us to be able to get better as a society and us to get better as people is love. And that's the only way we're going to be able to conquer something at the end of the day. It's not about the guy that's the so-called president of the United States or whatever the case. Shout out to the people, to the innocent people in Charlottesville, North Carolina, and shout out to everybody across the world that just want to be great and want to love.
Now, LeBron also taken to Twitter yesterday afternoon after President Trump's news conference saying, hate has always existed in America. Yes, we know that, but Donald Trump just made it fashionable again. Statues have nothing to do with us now. All right, Seattle Seahawks star Michael Bennett, meanwhile, says he will be sitting during the national anthem this season. Like Colin Kaepernick, Bennett says he is doing it to speak out on injustice in our country. And Bennett's teammates say him sitting is not a distraction. And head coach Pete Carroll, while he doesn't agree with the method, respects Bennett's right to do it.
His heart is in a great place, and he's going to do great work well after the time he's with us. And it's easy for me to support him in his issues. But I think we should all be standing up when we play national anthem.
It's not to be divisive. It's not to be negative. And I fully support Mike and his message and his thoughts, and definitely the way he went about it.
Finally, the Marlins' Giancarlo Stanton hitting a home run for the 6th straight game last night. He now has 11 long balls in his past 12 games. If he's able to keep this up, Stanton could make history. He is almost on pace to beat Roger Maris's old record of 61 home runs. And if you take a look at the greatest home run seasons ever, through 116 games, you see Stanton just one behind where Maris was back in 1961. And I know you're aware, John, you know, a lot of baseball fans still consider Roger Maris's 61 home runs as the true baseball home run record, considering the steroid accusations that surrounded Barry Bonds and Mark McGwire.
Well, Giancarlo Stanton, if he hits over that number, it would certainly clear things up and make things easier for those of us who care about that. He's crushing it. Andy Scholes, thanks very much. I appreciate it. All right, we have an eye on Charlottesville, Virginia right now. We have some live pictures, I believe, from inside the memorial service. This is the service for Heather Heyer, the 32-year-old woman who was killed in the events there. That's Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe. You can see him in the back right there. We are going to cover this event for you as that city and this nation remembers that young woman. Stay with us.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kate Baldwin. Right now, a quest for healing in a city heartbroken by hate-fueled violence and a country left searching for more moral guidance right now and wondering, where does the president stand? The memorial service is about to get underway as we speak for Heather Heyer, the woman killed while protesting against the white supremacist rallies in Charlottesville this weekend. A woman described as passionate, kind, and a sweet soul, and a strong advocate. Today, she is lost but not forgotten, and that is why there's an overflowing crowd turning out to pay their respects, and also wearing purple in her honor, her favorite color. Her mother and others close to her say Heather's death reflects the principles that guided her life. The man behind the wheel of the car that barreled into her and many others is now charged with murder. And amid the heartache, a new wave of moral outrage over the president's remarks from a member of his own party. I just got this in from Senator Lindsey Graham's office, and I will read it to you now. Mr. President, I encourage you to try to bring us together as a nation after this horrific event in Charlottesville. Your words are dividing Americans, not healing them. Through his statements yesterday, President Trump took a step backward by again suggesting there is moral equivalency between the white supremacist neo-Nazis and KKK members who attended the Charlottesville rally and people like Ms. Heyer. I, along with many others, do not endorse this moral equivalency. Senator Graham goes on to say, many Republicans do not agree with and will fight back against the idea that the party of Lincoln has a welcome mat out for the David Dukes of the world. Finally, my thoughts and prayers will be with the family and friends of Ms. Heyer as they remember and honor her today. That from Republican Senator Lindsey Graham, where many Republicans are having a hard time calling the president out by name, Lindsey Graham did just that, just now. We're going to get to that, much more of that in just a moment, but I do want to continue to shine the light this hour on the life and death of Heather Heyer. CNN's Kaylee Hartung. She is outside the memorial service in her honor right now. Kaylee, what are you hearing? What are you seeing? What's going on there?
Well, Kate, the Paramount Theater where the service will be held is now full as people coming here are being sent to an overflow area. Governor Terry McAuliffe is inside, Senator Tim Kaine, as well as the mayor of Charlottesville and some of the victims who survived the attack that took Heather Heyer's life. We've just received a copy of the program from our Rosa Flores, who is inside. We've learned we will hear from both of Heather's parents, her grandfather, 2 cousins, the man who hired her to work with the Miller Law Group here in Charlottesville, as well as the Reverend Harold Baer, and Reverend Alvin Edwards will deliver the eulogy as he shared with Anderson Cooper last night the message he plans to share today.
If he was at all concerned about not only her but the 2 troopers who lost their life as a result of that group coming here, you know, if they had not been here, no lives would have been lost. But because she stood up for what she believed, she lived a life of significance and not a life of success. The president has a successful life, but not a significant life, because I don't know anybody he's made a difference in their life like she has.
Heather's parents have requested that no political views be shared in a service today that should be about remembering the life of their daughter. Kate?
And there's so much to remember from everything that we are just starting to learn about Heather Heyer. We'll be taking moments, some of the key moments from this memorial service as it gets underway. Kaylee's there for us. Kaylee, thank you so much. We'll be getting back to Charlottesville and that memorial service throughout the show. Even for a man who based his entire political career on discarding norms and traditions, the collective shock, though, over the president's latest remarks is both extraordinary as it is deep and wide. Americans woke up to these headlines today. The Washington Post's opinion page declaring the nation can only weep. The Chicago Sun-Times editorial calling him America's bigot-in-chief. CNN's Jeff Zeleny is outside Trump Tower right now in New York with much more on what's the view from inside the president's circle. So what is the word from inside the president's circle today, Jeff?
Well, Kate, we have received a tweet just moments ago from the president who's actually focused on what is going on there in Charlottesville. Let's take a look at this a tweet. I believe we have it here. It says the memorial service today for the beautiful and incredible Heather Heyer, a truly special young woman. She will be long remembered by all. That is a tweet from the president. But Kate, this is something that the president's advisors were hoping he could have talked about yesterday. They were hoping he could have continued his theme of the speech that he began earlier in the week when he was at the White House condemning the acts of hate over the weekend. But instead, we all saw that he took a different approach. He decided to show his private frustration at the criticism of his initial reaction publicly, as we've all seen now. But let's take a quick look at this moment that is still causing so much controversy among Republicans, like you said, Senator Lindsey Graham. It's because of the president saying both sides. Let's watch.
Well, I do think there's blame. Yes, I think there's blame on both sides. You look at both sides. I think there's blame on both sides, and I have no doubt about it, and you don't have any doubt about it either.
So there we heard the president saying both sides, both sides. Okay, that is what has frustrated many presidential advisors. They're being very silent about it this morning, I have to say. There's been very little public reaction. One administration official I talked to earlier this morning said this: "Hey, we have work to do and we're going to do it." But the reality is this has complicated the president's legislative agenda as well. So many Republicans he needs to work with him, and indeed they're supportive of his agenda, simply wish that he would talk about that and would have stuck to the script of infrastructure yesterday was designed to turn the page to do that. But he, of course, did not. But he'll be leaving Trump Tower here in a few hours, going back to New Jersey. And, Kate, we are just getting word in that he'll be actually going to Camp David on Friday to discuss with his National Security Council his Southeast Asia strategy, his military strategy in Asia. So this is something, again, the White House trying to get back on track. The president himself often drags them in the other direction. Kate.
Off the rails as of yesterday. Jeff, real quick, though, you've mentioned that you heard from someone within the White House saying that they've got work to do and they're going to do it. I mean, it does beg the question, what kind of work are they talking about? Are they talking about getting back to the agenda, or are they talking about work to do to try to heal the wound that he created with his comments just yesterday. I mean, you have to wonder when you see those photos from when he held that press conference yesterday of John Kelly kind of hanging his head, Gary Cohn, Jewish members of his inner circle, Jewish members of his cabinet, the African-American member of his cabinet. What are they saying? What are they doing today?
Well, I would put them in the category of people who have been utterly silent about this. You saw the looks on their faces. Chief of Staff John Kelly, I mean, the look on his face was very dispirited, disappointed. But as we know, he has explained his job as trying to bring order to the staff, not the president. He knows that that is A, impossible to do, and B, something that he cannot do. But there is deep disappointment among some of these staff members. But when they say we have work to do, they're talking about the legislative agenda. They're talking about just trying to focus on that. But I think that misses the magnitude of this. Okay, we heard the president earlier this week saying that he has condemned those remarks as it was a one-time event in past tense, then can move on. Of course, that's not the case here. He has opened up many old wounds. He has sided with supremacists, with members of the Ku Klux Klan. David Duke, as we know, praised this president. So there's no question the White House cannot turn this page. They cannot move forward with their agenda until he addresses this, and he alone will have to do this. He's not scheduled to make any comments today, Kate. We'll let you know if that changes.
All right, Jeff, great to see you. Thank you so much. Jeff Selling's on top of it for us from that angle. This morning, another measure of the president's remarks and how they're being received. 4 of the nation's top military leaders, all Joint Chiefs of Staff, have taken to Twitter to condemn racism and bigotry. These men are the president's top advisors on military and national security issues. What are they advising the president today? CNN's Barbara Starr is joining me now from the Pentagon on all of this. Barbara, can you give us some perspective on this? This seems pretty extraordinary.
It is very rare, Kate. To be clear, none of them are directly challenging the president or criticizing the president. But make no mistake, the Joint Chiefs have now stepped of their own free will into this national conversation. I think it's very important to see what they are tweeting. Let me start with the head of the U.S. Air Force, General David Goldfein, himself a combat veteran, saying, quote, "I stand with my fellow service chiefs in saying we're always stronger together. It's who we are as airmen." The head of the Army, General Milley, "The Army doesn't tolerate racism, extremism, or hatred in our ranks. It's against our values and everything we've stood for since 1775. Head of the Marine Corps, "No place for racial hatred or extremism in the U.S. Marine Corps. Our core values of honor, courage, and commitment frame the way Marines live and act." And the head of the U.S. Navy, very direct, saying events in Charlottesville unacceptable and mustn't be tolerated, and the U.S. Navy forever stands against intolerance and hatred. They are speaking to several audiences here. They are speaking to their troops. We know the man charged in the murder of Heather in Charlottesville served in the Army very briefly. We know one of the heads of one of these white supremacist groups served in the Marines. They are speaking to their troops. They are speaking to veterans saying this is intolerable. This will not be tolerated in U.S. military ranks. But they are also very aware, we know, that there is this national conversation, and they know that when people see these pictures in Charlottesville, they see people dressed in fake military gear to a large extent. They see these images, and now the Joint Chiefs speaking out, and it's so extraordinary, Kate, because really, since the moment Donald Trump started running for president, they had been very determined to stay out of what some might call a domestic political issue. Today, not so much. They are weighing in. Kate?
It's really remarkable. Barbara, thank you so much for bringing us that important perspective. We'll be coming back to you. All right, we're also going to be getting back to Charlottesville, to that memorial service for Heather Heyer. Throughout the hour, we are keeping our eye there in Charlottesville. We will be getting back there in just a moment. But joining me to discuss everything that has transpired, former Democratic mayor of Philadelphia, Mayor Michael Nutter, is here, and CNN political analyst and USA Today columnist Kirsten Powers is here. David French with the National Review, and also White House reporter for the Washington Post, Abby Phillip. Thank you so much all for being here. Abby, first to you, wanted to get your reaction to the statement that Lindsey Graham put out that I read a little at the top of the hour, and where he calls out the president pretty directly, where many Republicans have not. What's your take on it?
Well, it's not entirely surprising because, as you noted, Lindsey Graham is not a stranger to criticizing the president. But it's telling because it sounds in some ways like he's signaling to the rest of his party, this is the direction that you need to go in, that your statements need to be a little bit more strong. And I think, you know, Republicans have to kind of talk to each other here. They have to signal to each other what's okay. I know that sounds kind of cynical, but this is politics, and sometimes people are hesitant to stick their necks out, especially criticizing a president in their own party. So I think Lindsey Graham is someone who has often been a strong and a vocal person out there pushing back on Trump, but it's notable also because he's a senator from a southern state.
Exactly.
It is important for him to say that, to actually be on the front lines of an issue like this, because this is a debate that's going on in South Carolina too. I remember when a couple years ago after the Charleston shooting, they had a whole debate about whether to take the Confederate flag down. That was a key moment for those lawmakers in that state. Southern Republicans have to lead the way on this, and unfortunately help their brothers and sisters in their own party figure out what to do here.
David, I want to get your perspective on this, because we've seen some other Republicans, big-name Republicans like John Kasich, John McCain, Marco Rubio, Jeb Bush, all of them either mavericks or have run against Donald Trump, notably, calling the president out by name. But then there was this. Manu Raja reported this morning, David, is that the Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, is privately upset with the president's handling of this episode. That's according to a source close to the leader. Is that enough, David?
It's nowhere near enough. I mean, at this point, you know, what you have, I think, is you still have a lot of Republicans with their heads in the sand, that they're sitting there thinking, let's just get through these bad news cycles and we can still accomplish some good things with the president's agenda. We can lower taxes. We can do some other good things. But they cannot miss that there is a larger cultural conversation. There's a larger cultural significance to what's happening here. And that larger cultural significance can swamp 2 to 3% on tax rates and its long-term importance. And what you had here was the President of the United States gave a press conference that was the press conference of the alt-right's dreams. And that's a significant moment. The alt-right was celebrating this moment because in many ways they viewed that he mainstreamed them, that he distinguished them from Nazis.
I'm only going to jump in for 1 second. I want to take us back to Charlottesville right now.
Maddow now has reaction from inside the camp of Senator Mitch McConnell. Maddow, what are you learning?
Yeah, that's right. A source close to the Republican leader tells me that the Senate Majority Leader is upset at President Trump over his handling of this episode, believing that the president could be potentially opening up long festering racial tensions. This, of course, Mitch McConnell has a long history on working on civil rights issues. The concern from the Senate Majority Leader is that the president, by his comments yesterday, essentially could be undercutting the years of work that has been done on these civil rights issues. Now, Senator McConnell actually has not put out a statement since yesterday, raising questions about why he has not joined a lot of other Republicans in going after President Trump. One reason why, I'm told by this source, is that the Senate Majority Leader is concerned about this looking like retribution because of their fight that happened last week. Remember that spat that occurred between President Trump and Mitch McConnell that occurred when the president accused Mitch McConnell of failing on health care, failing to deliver a key vote on health care. This, that after Mitch McConnell said the president may have had excessive expectations about what he could accomplish coming in. Mitch McConnell not wanting to look like he's getting into a back and forth with the president, but behind the scenes, John, I'm told that McConnell has had concerns with the president over this whole Charlottesville episode, wants to make that very clear. I think we can expect him to say something publicly as soon as today on this, just adding another voice to this episode. But one other reason why, John, is that there's some concern about going too hard after the president. They still have to work together, particularly in September, when the government needs to be funded past September 30th to avoid a government shutdown, when they need to raise the national debt ceiling to avoid a debt default. They're going to have to do a lot of work together. So McConnell has been cautious about this, but expect some potentially strong words coming out soon, even as his home state of Kentucky, John, and Lexington, where demonstrations could take place there. Some white supremacists warning that they may do that as well, John.
And one of the really interesting parts of this, of course, is that Mitch McConnell's wife, Elaine Chao, was standing next to the President of the United States when he said all of these things, which I'm sure doesn't make the situation any easier for the senator.
Yeah, that's right. And in fact, afterwards, she was asked specifically by reporters about the flap that occurred last week, and she said that she stands by both men, referring to both President Trump and the Senate Majority Leader. But of course, that adds a little bit of awkwardness, if you will, particularly if that event, John, as you know, was about infrastructure. She's the transportation secretary. She's going to have to shepherd this through, and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell will have to get that enacted pass through the Senate if they were to achieve one of President Trump's chief objectives here. But just showing, John, that the president's remarks yesterday getting criticism from all fronts and making it harder and overshadowing things that they're trying to do on Capitol Hill, John.
All right, Manu Raju, thank you so much for your reporting. I want to go back to Charlottesville, where the public memorial for Heather Heyer set to begin. Industry leaders out of the President's Business Council. CNN chief money correspondent Christine Romans joins me now. What's going on here?
And, you know, there are a lot of other ones who are deciding whether they should stay here. Look, Richard Trumka, who runs the AFL-CIO, also Thea Lee, who's at the AFL-CIO, they both said that they're not going to be advising this president anymore. Richard Trumka this morning on another network saying, frankly, they hadn't even met. And so this idea of making manufacturing great again, it wasn't really getting off the ground anyway. You can also see Scott Paul there for the Alliance for American Manufacturing, a lobby group for American manufacturers also leaving. This is after Merck, Under Armour, Intel, those CEOs left the President's Advisory Council. And even more notably, the Walmart CEO, who's on a different advisory board, the Walmart CEO out with pretty sharp comments in a message to his own employees. Keep in mind, Doug McMillon runs a company, Walmart, that is basically kind of Main Street America, right? It's got the largest private sector workforce in the country, about a million and a half workers. He said this: "We, too, felt that he missed a critical opportunity of Donald Trump, the president, to help bring our country together by unequivocally rejecting the appalling actions of white supremacists." So you're seeing companies, the business class, breaking with the business president here because they are not in step on this issue, just like they're not in step on climate change, just like they're not in step on other issues as well. You know, that immigration is one noted a departure as well.
Yeah, Doug McMillon, the president was asked about him yesterday, and you could see it sort of got to him a little bit. He says he knows Doug McMillon, but that was a political statement from the head of Walmart. They're interesting. We talked to Javier Palmeras, who's the chair of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. I know you know Javier.
Yeah.
He's sticking around. He's staying in the Diversity Council because he thinks he can have a voice. How much pressure do you think these guys are feeling?
You know, they are feeling a lot of pressure from their shareholders, from their customers. There was a big online push on social media for Campbell Soup, for that CEO to step back, saying it's just not in step with like the image that they want as that company. There are CEOs, though, who say, look, we think we should have a seat at the table. We want to be there and talk about manufacturing and talk about American jobs. But it is notable how much pressure these CEOs are under. There's also kind of a feeling among some of them that there's a post-Trump world now. There's a pro-business environment. Maybe they still will get a tax cut down the line, but they're kind of looking beyond the drama in the White House toward their own businesses.
All right, Christine Romans, great to have you here with us. Thanks so much. All right, President Trump lashed out at the removal of Confederate statues. Now 4 more monuments to Confederate icons taken down overnight. That happened in the city of Baltimore. We will speak to the city's mayor.
He is not a racist, I can tell you that. He's a good person. He actually gets a very unfair press in that regard. But we'll see what happens with Mr. Bannon. But he's a good person, and I think the press treats him, frankly, very unfairly.
President of the United States talking about Chief Strategist Steve Bannon, whose fate is not any clearer this morning, though a member of the President's Diversity Council is calling for Steve Bannon to resign. Joining me now, Javier Palmeras. He is the President and CEO of the United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, a member of the Diversity Council. Javier, always great to see you. Your group, the Hispanic Chamber, put out a statement after the President's initial response to Charlottesville. It said this: denouncing white supremacy without equivocation or without reservation should have been a no-brainer for President Trump. And the group went on to say that it will continue to work with the White House, but the administration's behavior makes continuing that role exceedingly difficult. That was after Saturday. After yesterday, after the president made even more clear where his heart and head is on this matter, will you continue to work with the White House?
You know, let me begin by saying, John, that a clear, unequivocal denunciation of anti-Semitism, of Nazis, of white supremacy was the order of the day. The president missed that moment. And these are the moments that define a presidency. These are the moments that define a president. We will continue to serve in the capacity, but only because it is my constituency that is asking me to stay in the role. I represent American small businesses, women-owned businesses that collectively contribute over $668 billion to the American economy. Our job is to make sure that our small businesses, our American job creators and taxpayers, have a voice in this administration, frankly, in any administration. So the path forward is clear. We stay the course, but I have to say it is a sad day for the American people, and I call on this president to remove Steve Bannon. I think that would be a clear signal that he understands the gravity of the situation and that he is taking steps to remove this anti-Semitism, this nexus of hate-filled rhetoric that is right down the hall from the Oval Office.
Steve Bannon wasn't in Trump Tower yesterday. As far as we know, Steve Bannon hasn't talked to the president since Saturday over the last few days. They may have exchanged some text messages here, but this wasn't a Steve Bannon statement. This was a statement from President Trump. So why do you think removing Bannon will change anything?
Absolutely, the president owns what has happened here. This is a clear failure on behalf of the president and the rest of the administration. But Bannon's influence and his fingerprints are all over this. At the end of the day, Steve Bannon is against everything my association stands for. Let's think about this for just a moment. Steve Bannon is anti-globalization, not realizing that 95% of the global market exists outside of the United States, and our businesses, in order to grow, must play in the global marketplace. Steve Bannon is anti-immigrant, not realizing that 42% of America's Fortune 500 corporations were started by immigrants.
I totally get this, and absolutely, I understand from an economic standpoint, at a minimum, why your group opposes Steve Bannon. But you're ready to quit Steve Bannon for the president's comments, but you're not ready to quit the president.
Absolutely, I'm ready to quit the president. I don't serve this president. I serve the American taxpayers who put me in this role. I don't want to conflate the two. I serve at the pleasure of the American small business owners who are asking me to stay the course and to ensure that American small business has a voice in this or any administration. Whether I agree with the president or not has nothing to do with it, really, John.
And I understand that, and I appreciate where you're coming from on that. So the next time the Diversity Council meets with the President of the United States, the next time you have a chance to say something to him, what will you say?
We're not waiting for a meeting. We're sending our message right now. Clearly, I'm sending it right here and right now. He has failed this moment. He needs to make sure that he understands the gravity of the situation and that he owns it. He needs to act presidential. He needs to bring this country together. That's why he's in that White House. That's why he's in our White House.
Have you seen any sign that he will act the way you want him to?
You know, I remain hopeful. There are people around him, like Ivanka, like Secretary Perdue, like Secretary Perry, like Secretary Mnuchin, who I do work with constantly, and I'm hopeful that those voices will win out and that he will see the error of his ways and do the right thing by the American people.
Javier Palmeras, as I said, always nice to talk to you. Thanks so much for coming in for us today. Appreciate it.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it.
All right, the alt-right is praising him. The White House is digging in. Talking points urging Republicans to say that the president is entirely correct. That's next.
I have asthma, one of many pieces in my life.
Good morning, everyone. John Berman here. The big question this morning is, what now? What now, after the president made his feelings crystal clear on the violence and deaths sparked by white supremacists this weekend? What now for Republicans critical of the president's words on hate, but less critical of the man or his agenda? What now for the White House staff, including those of the Jewish faith, a faith that was slandered loudly and clearly on the streets of Charlottesville? What now for the military, whose leaders have made unusual, bold statements in reaction, if not opposition, to the president's words? What now for the family of Heather Heyer? She was killed, perhaps murdered, because of the hate. Her memorial begins shortly. What now for the United States, all the United States, and its ongoing struggle to understand its own complicated heritage? The president's comments have been critiqued and chewed over for many hours now, but let's set a baseline here. At a bare minimum, the president said that folks who marched alongside or near self-proclaimed white nationalists chanting racist, anti-Semitic, and Nazi slogans, at a bare minimum, he called these very fine people.
You had some very bad people in that group, but you also had people that were very fine people. They were people protesting very quietly the taking down of the statue of Robert E. Lee. You had a lot of people in that group that were there to innocently protest.
Very fine people. So make no mistake, this is an important moment, a different moment, which is developing before our eyes this morning. So what now? Let's go first to Jeff Zeleny at Trump Tower. You know, Jeff, they've had a night to digest and see the reaction to the president's statement. Wondering if you're getting a sense from inside the White House staff, the Trump team, how they think things are going this morning.
Good morning, John. The people inside the White House and indeed here at Trump Tower, inside the president's inner circle, have been virtually silent. There's been no comment from Ivanka Trump, from Jared Kushner, from any of the top advisors. This is the most uncharacteristically silent White House that I have seen in such a critical